Time for cake. I do the walks, as some of you may or may not know. I do walks once a month where we walk around Coombe Abbey, and I do some philosophical motivational talking. Then I take people for tea and a cake and a sandwich, and we sit and I do a little bit of a talk about different things. It's a really great afternoon. It's quite transformational because you've got this like 500-year-old monastery, like I've got about 500 acres of land. It's very beautiful, and you know, nature is a great teacher. I learn massive amounts just from walking around. But the point is, every single day, every single time I do this walk, and I sat down and look around, and there's just this you know, this table full of cakes and scones and sandwiches and coffee and tea. It's just like a banquet. It's just very beautiful. It's a very beautiful environment. I hold my talk in the restaurant, but the part of the restaurant I hold it on is called the chapel. It's the old chapel from the monastery. It's very spiritual. We're quite secluded. We're set away from the rest of the people. It's very beautiful, and every single time I'm there, I say to people, look at the food around you, look at what you've manifested, look at what you've created. We've created this today between us. This wasn't here, now it is here. And I say to them, and this is true, I said every single day of my life I find time to have tea and cake, to have tea and a sandwich, to go to a cafeteria. Everywhere I go in the world, I will find a nice cafe and I'll sit and I'll contemplate. I'll take time out because I can. I'll do it because I can. When I was younger and working in factories and having to ask when I wanted to go for a piss and having to clock in and clock out and having to live under the dominion of a foreman and having to worry every time we went in for a pay rise, the management would come out and say, oh, there's going to be redundancies, we're losing work, and everyone would think, oh, don't ask for too much money because they're going to make everyone redundant. So this whole feeling of being imprisoned, you know, I let that go about 20 years ago, and when I started working for myself. And since then, I make a point every single day of having those little moments of bliss where I stop at a cafe. And I've got friends, my friend Warner, I meet him quite often in London. My friend Shams, my friend Wael in Dubai, his wife's over on my sovereignty course at the moment. When she's here, I go and take her for tea. We went to the cathedral where there's a really nice cafe, and we sit in this magnificent cathedral and have tea and a cake. Wherever I go in the world, recently I went to BAFTA. I took a couple of friends for tea at BAFTA. We're sitting in BAFTA with all these Oscars and all these kind of celebrities and all the, you know, this kind of environment where the best writers in the world are sitting or have seated, and we're sitting there, we're having tea and cake wherever I go. Sometimes I just stop on the side of the road you know, at one of these, I love these little cafes on the side of the road where you can have a proper cup of builder's tea, and you can just sit and watch the traffic go by. Wherever I go, when I was in New York, you know, we found a proper American diner and had, you know, eggs on toast every single day. There was I think there was a Starbucks in the Times Square. I think it was about 20 Starbucks, but you know, in our actual hotel, wherever we went. When I was a rep, I used to stop at Shakespeare's old house where Shakespeare lived. I used to sit at Shakespeare's house where Shakespeare lived, and have tea and sandwiches with no crusts on and cakes because I could. I've always made a point of doing that, but now that since I've been working for myself, I make a point of doing it every single day because I can. I work hard. I put the work in. I only really do things that I love doing, and that's because I've chosen to do that. I write and I teach. That's really all I do. And I just sit and have tea. Yeah. Last week I met a friend of mine called Debbie Anzalone, who's producing one of my films. If you look Debbie Anzalone up online, she's a great director. We sat in a place called Valerie Patisserie. It's the best tea in London. It's tea with tea leaves. And we sat and we went through the script and we did our script meeting. And I stopped and I just suddenly said, this just doesn't get any better than this, does it? This is great. And then last week I was sat in the Soho Club in London with James Cosmo, sharing sharing a cheesecake, because he wanted cheesecake and I said I'm not having cheesecake because I've got a physique to look after, I've got this body to look after. And he ordered one cheesecake and he said you better bring 2 spoons just in case. So me and James Cosmo ended up sitting sharing a cheesecake after we'd just had a lovely meal, and we talked about amazing things. James Cosmo was in Braveheart and he was in Highlander, which is one of my favourite films. He's also in Game of Thrones at the moment. He's a great actor. He's doing a couple of films for me at the moment. But the point I'm making is I sat there and had tea with James Cosmo. I made a point of having tea. When I was in Edinburgh, I stopped in a hotel and I'm having tea and cakes with Rick Young, who's one of my friends, one of the best BJJ guys in the world, amazing man. You know, I sat on in the hotel. The sun was just rising, on my own with some breakfast on the main high street in Edinburgh, looking at the castle, making a point of enjoying the moment, enjoying that moment. When I did my 32 city tour, 64 shops, every single place we went we found a nice cafe, we found somewhere to have a cup of tea. We take time every single day to have those moments of bliss. We don't get caught up, you know, in this kind of cycle of having to just produce and not being quite sure why we're producing. Making a point of just stopping. Like this morning, before I did these talks, I went to Coombe Abbey and I walked around and I sat by the river, by the lake, and then I went and sat by a tree. I sat under a tree and asked the tree for guidance. Then I walked around and you know, kind of had lots of moments within an hour that I walked of just sitting there. Later on I probably will walk again with my friend Warner, and in between that I'll get the work done that I need to get done. But I'm enjoying my life, and I'm trying to encourage people to do that. When we do the walk and the talk and the cakes, one of the reasons people get so much from it, because it has a profound effect on people, is because their life stops for a moment and they're suddenly walking around this country park and there are swans and ducks and just, you know, just every variety of animal, even deer running past. And then they're going into this kind of 5-star hotel and having cakes and great conversation. That's the point, it's the great conversation. We're sitting talking about great things. And we're doing that because we can, we choose to do it. When I was a kid, it seemed that we only did that once a year. Once a year for 2 weeks, we would go to Clacton or Skegness for a holiday, and it was like, it was bliss when we went. But it was almost as though my mum and dad wouldn't allow themselves to have that. They wouldn't make that shape more often. They would just do it once a year. And every year when we were there, my dad would get up in the morning about 6 o'clock, and he would take his binoculars and he would walk along the beach for an hour and then walk back. So we'd have about 2 or 3 hour walk looking at ships and stuff, and he just loved it. And he'd come back and he'd have a cooked breakfast and he'd have a day. And it's just that feeling, why don't we do that more often? Why didn't they do it more often? My dad would often say to me, you know, later on when he was older, he used to go to Spain, but he said he'd be on the plane back home from Spain, you know, I don't know, 2 hours or 3 hours later, he'd be working back in the factory in a job that he hated. And he was very hard working, my dad, but it was that feeling that we can only allow ourselves this much. We can only allow ourselves, you know, that much pleasure, that much rest, that much respite. But actually, if we really choose to, if we want to make that shape, if we want to take our energy, we can create that all the time. I stood with my friend Shams. She's travelled all the way over from Dubai for my sovereignty course, and we stand outside Coombe Abbey, and I said the first lesson is to look at what you've created today, this magnificent hotel. When you go, that will just be quantum soup. You know, it will exist as a memory in your mind. You've made space for it, but you know, you've actually created this space, you've actually created this environment, you've created this hotel, you've created this experience, you've created this opportunity. And it's important to recognize that you're the one that's creating it. You are the creator. You choose to create. If we want to be angry and cynical, we can create all that shit stuff we've want. I've done all that. I know exactly how to do that. I know how to create aggression. I know how to create violence. I know how to create fear. I know how to create all that. It's not a nice experience. I created it because I didn't know any better. And when I meditated on it, when I meditated and spoke to God, He said to me, you created that aggression because you think that's what you need to do. You think the world needs to be aggressive. You think the world needs to be angry and violent. You feel as though you need to go through that, but actually you don't. Just create something better. Create something different. So that's what I do every single day. I've got this beautiful house here. I've created that, or co-created that. I go to London, probably spend 2 weeks of the month in London. I've got a place in London because most of the work is down there for what I do. I've created a beautiful relationship with my wife and with my children. And I create opportunities, and I create cakes. I'm very good at creating cakes. Any of my friends will tell you I am the meister when it comes to creating cakes. And I don't even eat that much of it. I just enjoy the creation of it. I enjoy looking at it and thinking, we've created this today. We've made this shape. And why don't we make that shape more? Why do I have to just do that once every, why do I have to do that every once a year? Why don't I do that once a week? Why don't I do that once a day? Why don't I do that, why don't I create an environment? Why don't I create a job? Why don't I create work that I love, which I have? Why don't other people do that? Create a job that you love so that you're in that place all the time. So that you're constantly in that moment of bliss. So we're kind of extending the fortnightly bliss that we get when we have we called it the Coventry holiday fortnight. Everyone in Coventry went on holiday at the same time, and the factories all closed down at the same time. Everyone went away, everyone come back at the same time, very regimented. Once a year we allowed ourselves. If you went away more than once a year, it's because you were rich. But actually, I think people who are starting to experience that more often now are just people that are using their imagination in a different way. We can create that every single day. Every single day. Take your kids. I always took my kids wherever I went. When I was teaching, I took them with me. People say, well, I want to do this, but I've got kids. I want to do that, but I've got kids. Yeah, well, get your kids involved. I became a world-class martial artist with my kids involved. All my kids were, kind of quite highly graded in martial arts because they grew up with it. They were there. My son, when he could only just walk, was walking around hitting pads in my class when he could just walk. That's why he's a great martial artist. He's a great judo player. And my girls are exactly the same. They've all done great things because they've been brought up around that. My oldest daughter goes away, I don't know how often she goes away, probably 4 or 5 times a year. And she lives a beautiful life. She's got a beautiful daughter, she's got a fantastic husband. She's created that. She's created it because she can. And you can as well. You do not have to work in an environment where you have to ask to go for a piss. You don't have to work in an environment where you have to clock in and out. You do not have to do a job that you hate doing. You don't have to do that. I'm not saying that change is easy. I'm saying the change is difficult, but I'm saying the change is possible. And people like me, ordinary people, are telling you to do that. Saying, giving you permission, saying, have a look at that. Why don't you become a full-time martial artist? Why don't you become a sculptor? Why don't you become an like a writer? And again, put the work in, do the time, and maybe it's like a big ship. We decide to turn a big ship round. It doesn't turn instantly. It takes its time to turn because it's a big old vessel. Our lives are like that. Sometimes it takes time to turn these things around. But the main thing is that we're aiming towards turning them around. And once you do it once, you realise you can do it again and again. So I quite often give people experiences. They'll come on the walk, or there are things, maybe I'll meet somebody and have a cup of tea with them or something, or and I'll create an experience, say to them, this is an experience I'm helping you to create, but recognise that you created it. And if you can create it once, you can create it again. So it's showing people it's possible to create it, and then helping them to get rid of old core beliefs and get rid of old scripts and get rid of old fears and old insecurities and old dogma. Get rid of all that and start creating beautiful things every single day. And then everybody you bump into, you don't even have to tell them that you're doing it. because you are the example. They're seeing that you're doing it, and they're seeing that you're ordinary, that you're just like them, and if you can do it, they can do it. So there's room for cake every single day, be in no doubt about that. I am certain about that. There is room for that, or the equivalent of that. There is room every single day for you to find some bliss, for you to do something that you love. I recently took 2 weeks off to read a set of books that I wanted to study, because I could. You know, I mean, I went and taught in Las Vegas. I was having tea, back to the tea again, I was having tea in Las Vegas with Chuck Norris. He invited me over to teach for him. I was having tea with Chuck Norris, talking about when Bruce Lee used to ring him to come and spar. It was just surreal, but I did that because I could. You know, I had dinner with the Machados. I had dinner with the Machado brothers, you know, from the Gracie family. A beautiful family. I spent all evening with them, talking to them, and Higgin Machado gave me a private lesson, a one-on-one, just in the middle of the hall, you know, just an amazing man. I'm with Benny Urquidez, who's one of the greatest kickboxers ever, you know, in history. When I meet Benny Urquidez, he's teaching on the same circuit. His wife takes a real shine to me. His wife's the great-great-granddaughter of Geronimo. We sit at dinner, me, Sharon, Benny, and Benny's wife, and she puts a hand on my neck for 20 minutes and does a meditation and talks to me about spirituality, and talks to me about the fact that she sees guides and she's all these different things. She's saying, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience. Why did I have that experience? Because I could. And it's something I wanted to experience. People are being given the opportunity all the time to have new experiences, but they don't take them. They'll find some reason not to take them. You know, it's too much money, or it's too much time, or it's not convenient. I had a great guy I met recently. It was great. I really loved his honesty. He said to me, I've been moaning like fuck for a long time about the fact that what you do is too expensive for me. He said, and then when you did a free talk in Coventry, I found myself thinking, it's too far to go. And he said, I found myself thinking, what does this guy have to do? You know, does he have to pay me to come? And he realised that he was just making up reasons and excuses why he couldn't do it. He suddenly realised that all that stuff was free online anyway. It's all there. It's not expensive, it costs nothing at all. And some of the experiences cost money. That's just an exchange of energy. But that's what we do. We are offered experiences. We're given the opportunity to do things. We don't do them. We don't do them when we find 20 good reasons why we can't do them. There's always a good reason. But actually there's never a good reason. If you want to do something, do it. Don't give yourself a treat every 20 years. I remember my friend's nan sitting with a broken telly. She's got tens of thousands in the bank, but she won't fix the telly. And that's her only luxury, because she was quite old. But she wouldn't fix the telly. Why don't you want to fix the telly? Well, it's expensive, but you've got the money. Yeah, but that money's for a rainy day. Well, this is it. The rainy day's here. Your telly's broke and you're in your 80s. And that money's, you know, just going to be sat there wasted. That's what people do. They end up sitting on top of something, saving it for a rainy day. I'll do that experience when I'm this age. I'll go to that class when I'm that age. I'll do that course when I'm fit. I'll start that next year, new year, any year but now, any time but now. There's always a good reason, but actually now is the time to be doing it. Now is the time to make room for cakes. It's your choice. Why should you do it? Because you can. You're here to have a great time. Have a great time.